The message arrived on a cold Tuesday morning in the command center of the human colony ship Liberty. Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his usual black coffee when the communication screen flickered to life. A symbol of the Galactic Council appeared, followed by an alien face he recognized as Prime Minister Kex Thul of the Zaltharian Republic. Jake set down his coffee cup slowly. Official messages from the Council were rare, and they usually meant trouble. The alien's 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he began to speak in the translated human language. Captain Morrison, by order of the Galactic Council, all human presence beyond your home solar system must cease immediately. You have 60 standard days to evacuate all personnel, equipment, and facilities from New Harmony and return to Earth. This order is final and not subject to appeal. The screen went dark. Jake stared at the blank monitor for several seconds, trying to process what he had just heard. Around him, the bridge crew had gone completely silent. Lieutenant Sarah Williams, his communications officer, was the first to speak. "Sir, did he just order us to abandon everything?" Jake nodded slowly. "Get me Dr. Carter at the research facility. Now." The call connected quickly. Dr. Lisa Carter appeared on screen, her brown hair tied back and her lab coat stained with whatever she had been working on. Behind her, Jake could see the busy research lab where she and her team studied alien biology and genetics. "Jake, thank goodness you called. I just received the most insane message from the Council. They want us to destroy all our research and leave the planet. Surely this is some kind of mistake?" "I got the same message, Lisa. It's not a mistake." Jake's voice was grim. "How much of your work can you save?" Lisa's face went pale. "Save? Jake, I've been working here for 12 years. My team has made discoveries that could help every species in the galaxy. We've found cures for diseases, new ways to grow food, methods to clean polluted worlds. If they make us destroy this ... then save what you can," Jake interrupted. "Hide. It's encrypted. Do whatever you have to do. Something tells me we're going to need that knowledge someday." Lisa nodded and ended the call. Jake immediately opened a channel to Commander Ryan Hayes at the Titan mining station, humanity's largest operation outside Earth's solar system. Ryan's weathered face appeared on screen. The mining station commander looked like he had aged 10 years in the past hour. "Jake, please tell me you have some good news about this evacuation order." "I wish I did, Ryan. How many people do you have out there?" 15,000 miners, engineers, and support staff, plus their families." Ryan ran a hand through his gray hair. "The Vorthans are already sending warships to take over the facility. They want us gone, but they sure don't mind taking everything we built." Jake felt anger burning in his chest. The humans had discovered the Titan system and built the mining station from nothing. They had turned a dead rock into a thriving industrial center that supplied rare elements to half the galaxy. Now the aliens wanted to kick them out and take over everything they had created. Similar evacuation orders had gone out to every human settlement, research station, diplomatic post, and mining operation beyond Earth's solar system. The Galactic Council, led by the Zaltharians and backed by the military might of the Vorthan Empire, had voted unanimously. Humanity was no longer welcome among the stars. The official reason was that humans were too dangerous and unpredictable. They expanded too quickly, fought too fiercely, and refused to follow the careful rules that governed galactic civilization. The real reason, Jake suspected, was fear. Fear that humanity would eventually challenge the established order and upset the careful balance of power that had existed for thousands of years. Dr. Lisa Carter worked through the night to save as much of her research as possible. Her team had made breakthrough discoveries in genetics that could have revolutionized medicine for all species. They had found ways to make crops grow in hostile environments, developed new materials stronger than anything previously known, and created medical treatments that could extend life for centuries. The Zeltharians had ordered all of this knowledge destroyed. They claimed it was too dangerous in human hands. Lisa knew better. They were afraid that human science was advancing too quickly and might soon surpass their own ancient technologies. She encrypted her most important files and hid them in secure data cores that she planned to smuggle back to Earth. If the aliens wanted to slow down human progress, they would have to try harder than simply ordering research destroyed at the Titan mining station. Commander Ryan Hayes supervised the most massive evacuation in human history. 15,000 people had to be moved, along with as much equipment and resources as possible. The Vorthans had given them 60 days, but their warships were already taking positions around the system. The aliens were being generous with the timeline. Ryan thought bitterly. They wanted to appear reasonable, while they stole everything humanity had built. The mining equipment alone was worth billions of credits, and the refined materials in storage could power a dozen star systems for years. Ryan's teams worked around the clock to load transport ships with people and equipment. They couldn't take everything, but they could take enough to prove that human engineering and determination had built something remarkable in this distant system. On Earth, President Claire Thompson faced the greatest crisis in human history. The exile order affected every human beyond the solar system. Military personnel, scientists, miners, farmers, traders, diplomats, and their families all had to return to a world that was already struggling to support 8 billion people. The population of Earth was about to increase by nearly 4 billion people in a matter of months. Cities would overflow, resources would be stretched to the breaking point, and unemployment would skyrocket. The aliens probably expected this crisis to cripple humanity for decades. President Thompson had other plans. She called an emergency session of the World Council and addressed the planet in a speech that would be remembered for generations. "Fellow humans," she began, standing before cameras that broadcast to every corner of Earth. "Today we have been told that we are not welcome among the stars. The Galactic Council has decided that humanity is too dangerous to share the galaxy with other species. They have ordered our people to abandon everything they have built and return to Earth." She paused, letting the words sink in. "They believe this will break our spirit. They believe this will end human expansion into space. They believe they can push us back into our corner of the galaxy and forget about us." President Thompson's voice grew stronger. "They are wrong. They have not weakened humanity. They have united us. They have not ended our journey to the stars. They have given us time to prepare for a greater journey than any we have taken before." The speech continued for 20 minutes, outlining plans for housing the returning populations, expanding Earth's cities and industries, and developing new technologies that would make humanity stronger than ever before. The aliens had meant to punish humanity, but they had instead given them the greatest opportunity in their history. Captain Jake Morrison brought the last group of evacuees from New Harmony back to Earth 3 days before the deadline. As his ship passed through the outer edge of the solar system, he looked back at the stars where humans had lived and worked for generations. The aliens thought they had won a victory by forcing humanity to leave. Jake smiled grimly as Earth grew larger. On his view screen, the aliens had made the biggest mistake in galactic history. They had given humanity a reason to become stronger, smarter, and more determined than ever before. The species that had once begged for acceptance among the stars would return someday. As their masters, the exile had begun, but Jake Morrison was already planning for the day when humanity would return to claim what was rightfully theirs. 5 years had passed since the Great Exile changed everything for humanity. Earth was a different world now, crowded with nearly 12 billion people where once there had been 8 billion. The returning colonists, miners, scientists, and their families had transformed the planet in ways no one could have predicted. Dr. Kevin Miller stood on the observation deck of New Atlantis, the largest underwater city ever built by human hands. Through the thick, transparent walls, he could see the lights of other underwater settlements stretching across the ocean floor like a galaxy of stars beneath the waves. The Pacific Ocean, once thought too deep and dangerous for permanent habitation, now housed over 200 million people. Kevin had been a terraforming specialist on distant worlds before the exile. He had spent 15 years learning how to make dead planets suitable for human life. Now he used those same skills to make Earth's oceans into vast new territories for humanity to expand into. Construction on New Pacific is ahead of schedule, reported his assistant, Dr. Monica Davis, as she reviewed the latest progress reports. The hydroponic farms are producing food for 3 million people, and the fusion generators are operating at full capacity. Kevin nodded, watching schools of fish swim past the observation windows. The aliens had thought they were trapping humanity on one small world. Instead, they had forced humans to discover just how much space their home planet really contained. The oceans covered 70% of Earth's surface, and humans were learning to use every cubic meter of that space. Admiral Susan Brooks commanded the rebuilt human fleet from Luna, Base Alpha, hidden on the far side of Earth's moon. The base had grown from a small research station into a massive military complex that rivaled anything humanity had built during their colonial period. Susan walked through the main hangar bay, inspecting the newest ships in humanity's secret fleet. The vessels looked nothing like the old colonial ships that had evacuated humanity 5 years ago. These were sleek, deadly machines designed with 5 years of bitter experience and unlimited motivation. The Defender-class cruisers are ready for their first test flights, reported Captain Tony Rodriguez, the chief test pilot. The new engine design is 30% faster than anything we had before the exile. Susan smiled as she watched technicians working on the ships. The aliens had banned humans from space beyond their solar system, but they had said nothing about what humans could build while they waited. The isolation had given humanity time to develop technologies they never would have had the luxury to perfect while managing a galactic empire. The new ships were not just faster, they were smarter. Human engineers had spent 5 years studying every weakness in alien technology, every flaw in their strategies, every mistake they had made during the exile. When humanity returned to space, they would be ready for anything. Dr. Lisa Carter's underground research network had grown far beyond what she had imagined possible during those frantic final days on New Harmony. Working in secret laboratories hidden beneath cities around the world, her teams had made discoveries that would have been impossible under the careful restrictions of galactic law. Lisa stood in her main laboratory, 2 miles beneath the streets of Denver, studying genetic samples that would have horrified the Galactic Council. Her research had progressed far beyond simple medicine and agriculture. She now understood the biological weaknesses of every major alien species in the galaxy. The Zaltharian immune system has a critical flaw, explained Dr. Alan Parker, one of her top researchers. Their bodies cannot process certain protein combinations that are harmless to every other known species. Lisa studied the data on her screen. And the Vorthans? Their enhanced strength comes from a genetic modification that can be reversed with the right viral agent. Without their physical advantages, they're actually weaker than baseline humans. This knowledge would have been forbidden under galactic law. The Council had strict rules about research into alien biology, claiming it was to prevent the development of biological weapons. Lisa now realized the real reason for those restrictions. The aliens did not want anyone to discover just how vulnerable they really were. Meanwhile, the alien species that had forced humanity into exile were discovering the consequences of their decision. On New Harmony, The Zeltharian colonists who had taken over the human settlement were struggling with problems they had never anticipated. Governor Veltar stood in what had once been the human agricultural center, looking at rows of dying crops. The humans had made farming on New Harmony look effortless, but the reality was far more complex than the Zeltharians had understood. "The soil chemistry is wrong again," reported his chief agricultural specialist. "The human techniques require constant adjustment and monitoring. Without their expertise, we cannot maintain the same production levels." New Harmony had fed 6 million humans and exported food to 12 other colonies. Under Zeltharian management, the farms could barely feed the 2 million aliens who had moved to the planet. The sophisticated agricultural systems that humans had developed over decades were failing without the knowledge and experience to maintain them properly. The situation was even worse at the Titan mining station. Commander Zakun of the Vorthan military watched as another piece of human-built equipment broke down beyond repair. The mining operation that had once produced rare elements for half the galaxy was operating at less than 40% capacity. "The humans built this equipment to work with their maintenance schedules," explained the Vorthan chief engineer. "Without their technical knowledge, we cannot keep the systems running efficiently." The Vorthans were proud warriors who believed that superior strength could overcome any obstacle. They were learning that complex industrial operations required more than raw power. They required the kind of innovative thinking and technical expertise that humans had developed during centuries of solving impossible problems. Captain Jake Morrison now commanded supply runs between Earth's orbital stations and the growing lunar bases. His new ship, the Resilience, was twice as fast as his old colonial vessel and carried advanced sensors that could detect alien ships from incredible distances. During one routine flight to the lunar bases, Jake received an encrypted message that made him stop his ship and read the transmission 3 times. The message came from an alien source, someone using old diplomatic codes that only former allies would know. "Human Fleet Commander," the message read, "this is Ambassador Thizes of the Altarian Republic. My people opposed the exile order in the Council, but we were outvoted by the Zeltharian Vorthan Alliance. We wish you to know that not all species supported the decision to remove humanity from galactic civilization." Jake stared at the message. Ambassador Thizes had been one of humanity's few genuine friends in the Galactic Council. The Altarians were a peaceful species that valued knowledge and cooperation over power and territory. The message continued. "The situation in the galaxy grows worse each month. The Scrix Hive has begun expanding into the outer rim systems. Without human colonies to serve as early warning posts, their advance goes undetected until it is too late. The Council refuses to admit their mistake, but many of us believe that removing humanity has left the galaxy vulnerable to threats we cannot handle alone." Jake forwarded the message to Admiral Brooks and President Thompson. The aliens were starting to realize that humanity had served a purpose in galactic civilization beyond simply following orders and paying taxes. Humans had been the galaxy's warriors, explorers, and problem solvers. Without them, the careful balance that had maintained peace for centuries was beginning to collapse. Back on Earth, President Claire Thompson reviewed intelligence reports from the network of human spies and sympathetic aliens who continued to monitor galactic affairs. The picture that emerged was troubling, but also encouraging for humanity's future plans. The galactic economy was struggling without human innovation and trade. The military situation was deteriorating without human forces to patrol dangerous border regions. Most importantly, new threats were emerging that the alien civilizations seemed unable to handle with their traditional methods. Thompson smiled as she read the latest reports. The aliens had thought they were solving a problem by removing humanity from the galaxy. Instead, they had created a dozen new problems while giving humanity time to become stronger than ever. Before Dot, the isolation period was almost over. Soon, humanity would return to the stars, but not as the junior partners they had once been. They would return as the force that could save galactic civilization from the consequences of its own short-sighted decisions. 8 years after the Great Exile, the galaxy faced its first major crisis without human involvement. The threat came from beyond the galactic rim, from a region of space that had been unexplored and unguarded. Since humanity's forced departure, the Scrix hive moved like a plague across the stars. Their bioships, grown rather than built, consumed entire worlds and left nothing behind but empty space. They communicated through chemical signals that no other species could understand, and they showed no interest in negotiation or surrender. Prime Minister Kex Thule of the Zeltharian Republic stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council, his 4 eyes wide with panic. Behind him, holographic displays showed system after system falling to the Scrix advance. 17 star systems had gone dark in the past 3 months. Honorable representatives, Kex Thule began, his voice shaking, the Scrix hive has destroyed the Kepler 442 system completely. Our research station there sent a final transmission before all contact was lost. The entire system has been stripped of all organic matter. Commander Zethrock of the Vorthan Empire slammed his massive fist on the council table. The warrior's green skin had turned pale with fear, something no one had ever seen before. Our fleets engaged the Scrix ships and achieved nothing. Their vessels feel no pain, show no fear, and cannot be reasoned with. They consume our ships as easily as they consume planets. In the gallery reserved for lesser species, Ambassador Thyses of the Altarian Republic listened to the debate with growing horror. The council members were arguing about diplomatic solutions and defensive strategies, but none of them understood what they were really facing. The Scrix were not a normal species that could be negotiated with or intimidated. They were a biological weapon that had been created by some long-dead civilization and left to multiply in the darkness between galaxies. Only one species in the known galaxy had ever successfully fought enemies like this, and that species had been exiled 8 years ago. On Earth, Ambassador Helen Pierce monitored the alien communications from her station deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. The massive listening post had been built during the isolation years to track everything that happened in the galaxy beyond the solar system. Helen watched the intercepted council transmissions with a mixture of satisfaction and concern. The aliens were finally facing the kind of threat that humanity had always been prepared to handle, but their response was exactly as inadequate as she had predicted. The Vorthan battle fleets lost 60% of their ships in the last engagement, reported her assistant, Lieutenant Bob Carter. The Zeltharian diplomatic mission to establish contact with the Scrix lasted exactly 14 minutes before their entire delegation was consumed. Helen nodded as she watched the tactical displays. The aliens had spent centuries developing military strategies based on honor, ceremony, and predictable rules of engagement. The Scrix followed none of these rules. They simply consumed everything in their path and moved on to the next target. "Get me a direct line to General Anderson," Helen ordered. "It's time to brief him on the situation." General Paul Anderson commanded Earth's Strategic Defense Initiative from a command center built into the lunar surface. The facility had been designed to coordinate humanity's defense against any possible alien attack, but it was also prepared to monitor and respond to galactic threats that might eventually reach Earth. Paul studied the intelligence reports from the alien sectors with the cold analysis of a career military officer. The Scrix advance was following a predictable pattern, consuming systems with valuable biological resources first, and ignoring barren worlds that offered nothing to feed their endless hunger. Their expansion rate suggests they'll reach the core systems within 2 years, Paul told his staff during the morning briefing. The Zeltharian and Vorthan homeworlds will be direct targets within 18 months. Captain Amanda Ross, his intelligence chief, highlighted several star systems on the tactical display. The aliens are already evacuating their outer colonies. They're falling back toward their core territories and abandoning everything in the Scrix path. Paul smiled grimly. The same aliens who had forced humanity to abandon their colonies were now abandoning their own settlements in the face of a threat they couldn't handle. The irony was almost too perfect. Dr. Lisa Carter received the first official contact from alien sources in 8 years while working in her underground laboratory. The message came through old diplomatic channels that had been dormant since the exile, encrypted with codes that only former council members would possess. Dr. Carter, the message began. This is Dr. Morpheus, director of the Zeltharian Medical Research Institute. I am contacting you in violation of council directives because the current crisis requires expertise that only humanity possesses. Lisa read the message twice before calling her research team together. Dr. Morpheus had been one of her closest colleagues during her years on New Harmony. He was a brilliant scientist who had opposed her exile on scientific rather than political grounds. The message continued with detailed biological data about the Scrix species. Our analysis indicates that the Scrix are artificial organisms created through advanced genetic engineering. They appear to be designed as a biological weapon system with no natural weaknesses or limitations. Traditional military responses have proven completely ineffective. Lisa studied the biological data with growing excitement. The Scrix were indeed artificial, but like all biological organisms, they had to follow certain rules of chemistry and genetics. If they could be created, they could be destroyed, but it would require the kind of aggressive biological research that the Galactic Council had banned years ago. This is exactly the kind of problem we've been preparing for, Lisa told her team. 8 years of unrestricted research into alien biology gives us tools that no one else in the galaxy possesses. The crisis escalated rapidly as more systems fell to the Scrix advance. The Galactic Council's emergency sessions grew more desperate with each passing week. Traditional military strategies had failed completely. Diplomatic approaches were impossible, and evacuation was only delaying the inevitable. Ambassador Theises finally stood before the council and said what everyone was thinking, but no one wanted to admit. Honorable representatives, we must consider that our current approach is not working. Perhaps it is time to seek assistance from sources we have previously rejected. The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew what she meant, but none of the council members wanted to be the first to say it out loud. They needed help from the humans they had exiled in fear and arrogance. Prime Minister Kex Thul's voice was barely a whisper when he finally responded. The humans were exiled because they were too dangerous and unpredictable. How can we ask for help from a species we declared unfit for galactic civilization? Commander Zethrock's response surprised everyone. The proud Vorthan warrior had never shown respect for any other species, but the Scrix had broken something fundamental in his worldview. Perhaps the question we should ask is whether we can afford not to request their assistance. On Earth, President Claire Thompson convened an emergency session of the World Council as reports of the galactic crisis reached official channels. The aliens had not yet made any formal request for assistance, but intelligence sources indicated that such a request was inevitable. The irony is remarkable, President Thompson told the assembled world leaders. 8 years ago, they told us we were too dangerous to share the galaxy with other civilizations. Now they face a threat that proves exactly why dangerous species like humanity are necessary. Defense Minister Lucy Hayes raised the critical question that everyone was considering. If they do request our assistance, what should our response be? Do we help the species that exiled us, or do we let them face the consequences of their decision alone? President Thompson looked around the chamber at the faces of humanity's leaders. 8 years of isolation had made humanity stronger, smarter, and more united than ever before. The question was not whether they could help the aliens, but whether they should. "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it," she finally said. "But when we do, we'll be making that decision from a position of strength, not desperation. The galaxy is about to learn what happens when you force humanity to leave." The formal request arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered through the old diplomatic channels that had been silent for 8 years. President Claire Thompson read the message 3 times before calling an emergency meeting of the World Council. "To the government of Earth and the human species," the message began, signed by all 12 members of the Galactic Council. "We formally request immediate humanitarian assistance in dealing with the Scrix Hive crisis that threatens all civilized life in the galaxy." The rest of the message was filled with diplomatic language, but the core message was simple. The aliens, who had exiled humanity, were now begging for help from the species they had declared too dangerous for galactic civilization. Admiral Susan Brooks sat in the heated debate that followed in the World Council chambers. Her voice cut through the arguments with military precision. "Let them burn," she said coldly. "They cast us out when they were strong and united. They called us dangerous and unpredictable. Now they want us to save them from their own mistakes." Around the table, other military leaders nodded in agreement. General Paul Anderson leaned forward, his face hard with years of bitter memory. "They took everything we built, destroyed our research, and scattered our people across the galaxy. Why should we risk human lives to save civilizations that couldn't wait to get rid of us?" Dr. Kevin Miller raised his hand from his seat at the Underwater City Representatives table. The years of isolation had changed him, as they had changed all of humanity. Where once he had been a peaceful scientist focused on terraforming, now he thought in terms of power and strategy. "I disagree with Admiral Brooks," Kevin said, causing surprised looks around the chamber. "Not because I forgive what they did to us, but because this crisis represents the greatest opportunity in human history." He stood and activated the holographic display in the center of the chamber. Star charts showed the galaxy as it existed now, with Scrix forces advancing through the outer systems, while alien civilizations retreated in panic. "Look at this situation objectively," Kevin continued. "The species that once controlled the galaxy are helpless against a threat we can handle. If we respond to this crisis correctly, we don't return to the galaxy as the junior partners we once were. We return as the dominant force." President Thompson listened to the debate with the weight of human history on her shoulders. The decision she made in the next few hours would determine humanity's place in the galaxy for generations to come. She could choose revenge and let the aliens face destruction alone, or she could choose a path that would reshape galactic politics forever. "Dr. Carter," she called to the chief scientist, "can we actually stop the Scrix?" Lisa Carter stood and activated her own display, showing biological data that had been gathered during 8 years of unrestricted research. "Yes, Madam President. We've developed weapons specifically designed to counter biological threats like the Scrix. The aliens banned this kind of research years ago, which is why they're helpless now." She highlighted several biological weak points that her teams had discovered. The Scrix are artificial organisms, but they still follow the laws of biology. We've created targeted viruses that can shut down their reproductive systems, chemical weapons that dissolve their bioships, and genetic disruption fields that prevent them from communicating with each other. Admiral Brooks looked skeptical. "And the cost in human lives?" "Minimal," Lisa replied. "These weapons don't require ground troops or close combat. We can deploy them from our ships and watch the Scrix colonies collapse from a safe distance." The debate continued for 6 hours. Some argued for helping the aliens out of basic humanitarian principles. Others wanted revenge for the exile and the destruction of human colonies. A third group, led by Dr. Miller, argued for using the crisis to establish human dominance over galactic civilization. President Thompson finally called for silence and made the decision that would define humanity's future. "We will respond to the Galactic Council's request," she announced, "but we will do so on our terms, not theirs." She outlined the conditions that would govern humanity's return to galactic space. First, all human colonies and facilities that were seized during the exile will be returned to human control. Second, humanity will have equal representation with all other species combined in any new galactic government. Third, human military forces will have unrestricted access to any system that requires protection from external threats. The terms were not negotiable. The aliens could accept human dominance or face the Scrix alone. Captain Jake Morrison received his orders 2 days later. He would command the first human fleet to leave the solar system in 8 years, leading 12 ships of the new Defender class toward the Kepler 442 system, where the Scrix had established their forward base. Jake stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Liberation, watching Earth shrink behind them as they accelerated toward the battle zone. His crew was composed entirely of volunteers who had lived through the exile and understood what this mission represented. "All ships report ready for combat," announced his tactical officer, Commander Lisa Park. "Biological weapons are loaded, and targeting systems are calibrated for Scrix biosignatures." Jake nodded, feeling the weight of history on his shoulders. Humanity was returning to the galaxy not as refugees or supplicants, but as its saviors. The species that had once begged for acceptance among the stars were about to prove that they belonged at the top of the galactic hierarchy. The first battle took place in the outer edge of the Kepler 442 system, where 3 massive Scrix bioships were systematically consuming a Zeltharian research station. The alien defenders had been fighting for 6 hours with no effect whatsoever on the attacking creatures. Jake's fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel just outside the battle zone. Through his view screen, he could see the Scrix ships for the first time. They looked like enormous insects made of metal and flesh, with thousands of smaller creatures swarming around them like living missiles. "Target the largest bioship with disruption torpedo spread," Jake ordered. "All ships, fire on my command." The human weapons were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Instead of trying to blow up the Scrix ships, they attacked the biological systems that held them together. The torpedoes released clouds of engineered viruses that spread through the bioship's living tissue like wildfire. The effect was immediate and devastating. The massive Scrix vessel began to break apart as its biological components died and dissolved. Within minutes, the creature that had seemed invincible was nothing but drifting organic debris. The remaining Scrix ships turned to attack the human fleet, but they faced weapons designed specifically to counter their biology. Chemical bombs dissolved their armor. Genetic disruption fields prevented them from coordinating their attacks, and targeted viruses shut down their life support systems. The battle lasted 17 minutes. When it was over, all 3 Scrix bioships were destroyed, and their smaller support creatures were drifting dead in space. The human fleet had not suffered a single casualty. Commander Ryan Hayes led the boarding parties that rescued the surviving Zeltharians from their research station. The aliens who had voted to exile humanity 8 years ago now found themselves saved by the species they had condemned as too dangerous for galactic civilization. The Zeltharian station commander, Dr. Velanash, could barely speak as Ryan's teams evacuated his people to safety. "How did you destroy them so easily?" he finally asked. "We've been fighting the Scrix for months with no success." Ryan's smile was cold as space. "We had 8 years to prepare for threats like this, while you thought you were safe without us. Turns out exile was the best thing that ever happened to humanity." News of the human victory spread across the galaxy faster than light-speed communication. In 18 minutes, humanity had accomplished what the combined alien fleets had failed to do in 8 months of fighting. The Galactic Council's emergency session was unlike any in their recorded history. For the first time, they were not debating humanity's place in galactic civilization. They were pleading for humanity's continued protection against threats they could not handle alone. The exile that had been meant to weaken humanity had instead made them the galaxy's only hope for survival. The species that had once been declared too dangerous to share space with other civilizations had become their indispensable protectors. 6 months after humanity's first victory against the Scrix, the galaxy was a completely different place. Human fleets patrolled star systems that had been under alien control for thousands of years. The species that had once exiled humanity now competed for the privilege of hosting human military bases on their worlds. Admiral Susan Brooks stood on the command deck of the Retribution, humanity's newest and largest warship, as it orbited the former Scrix stronghold in the Vega system. Through the massive viewports, she could see the debris field where a Scrix hive world had existed just 2 weeks ago. "Final casualty report, Admiral," announced Captain Danny Roberts, her chief of staff. "0 human casualties. Complete elimination of Scrix presence in this system. The bioplanet has been sterilized and is ready for terraforming operations." Susan nodded with satisfaction. It had taken the combined alien fleets 3 years to push the Scrix back 1 star system. Humanity had eliminated the entire Scrix presence from 12 systems in 6 months, suffering fewer than 50 casualties in the process. The difference was not just superior technology, though human weapons were devastatingly effective against biological threats. The real advantage was that humans understood warfare in a way that the peaceful alien civilizations never could. They fought to win completely, not to achieve honorable stalemates or diplomatic advantages. On the planet New Geneva, in what had once been neutral space, representatives from every major alien civilization gathered for the most important political meeting in galactic history. The old Galactic Council was finished. The exile and the Scrix crisis had proven that the traditional system of government was too weak to handle real threats. Dr. Lisa Carter walked through the halls of the hastily constructed conference center, carrying data tablets that contained the future of galactic civilization. As humanity's chief xenobiological advisor, she would present the scientific evidence that would justify humanity's new position in the galaxy. "The biological analysis is complete," she told President Thompson, as they prepared for the opening session. "Every major alien species has critical vulnerabilities that were unknown before our exile research program. We now understand their biology better than they understand it themselves." President Thompson reviewed the data with the cold calculation of a leader who had guided humanity through its darkest period and emerged victorious. "And our proposals for the new government structure? Non-negotiable," Lisa replied. "Either they accept human leadership, or they face the next galactic crisis alone. The Scrix were just the beginning. Our long-range sensors have detected at least 3 other threats moving toward this galaxy from beyond the rim." The opening ceremony was a study in reversed power dynamics. 8 years ago, humanity had been the junior partner begging for acceptance in galactic civilization. Now, alien representatives waited nervously for humanity to decide their fate. Prime Minister Kex Thul of the Zelfarian Republic was the first to speak, his 4 eyes downcast in shame. "Honored human representatives, the Zelfarian people wish to formally apologize for our role in the exile decision. We now understand that our fears were misguided and our actions were counterproductive." Commander Zethrock of the Vorthan Empire stood next, his proud warriors bearing broken by months of military defeats. "The Vorthan military acknowledges that human forces are superior in every measurable category. We request permission to restructure our fleets under human command. President Thompson listened to each species grovel for human forgiveness and protection. The most powerful civilizations in the galaxy had been reduced to begging for the help of the species they had once considered too dangerous to exist. Alongside them, when the formal presentations were complete, President Thompson stood to address the assembly. Her words would be recorded and studied for generations to come as the moment when humanity's true place in the galaxy was finally recognized. 8 years ago, you told us that humanity was too dangerous and unpredictable for galactic civilization, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the silent chamber. You were right. We are dangerous to threats like the Scrix. We are unpredictable to enemies who think they understand how we will respond to challenges. She paused, looking around the room at faces that showed fear, shame, and desperate hope. But you made one critical error in your judgment. You assumed that dangerous and unpredictable were negative qualities. You forgot that sometimes the galaxy needs protectors who are willing to do whatever is necessary to preserve civilization. The terms of the new galactic government were presented without room for negotiation. Humanity would hold executive authority over all military and external defense matters. Human colonies would be re-established on every world they had been forced to abandon, with expanded territory grants as compensation for the exile. Most importantly, humanity would have veto power over any major galactic decision. Never again would the species that protected galactic civilization be subject to the political whims of those they protected. Captain Jake Morrison received his new assignment as the ceremony concluded. He would command the reestablishment of human presence on New Harmony, the first colony they had been forced to abandon during the exile. But this time, humanity was not returning as colonial settlers. They were returning as the dominant power. In the galaxy, Jake's fleet arrived at New Harmony to find the Zeltharian colonists packed and ready to leave. The aliens who had eagerly taken over human settlements 8 years ago were now desperate to evacuate before humanity reclaimed what was rightfully theirs. The agricultural systems are in terrible condition, reported Dr. Monica Davis as she surveyed the farms that had once fed millions. Zeltharian management reduced production by 70%. It will take years to restore full productivity. Jake walked through the settlement that had once been humanity's pride in the Outer Rim. The Zeltharians had allowed the infrastructure to decay, the research facilities to fall into disrepair, and the carefully balanced ecosystem to collapse. It was a perfect symbol of what happened when inferior species tried to maintain what humans had built. Start the restoration immediately, Jake ordered, and make sure every alien government gets a full report on the condition we found this place in. Let them see what happens when they try to replace human expertise with their own incompetence. On Earth, construction began on the new Galactic Defense Command Center, a massive facility that would coordinate humanity's protection of the galaxy from threats both internal and external. The center was built not in neutral space, but in Earth's orbit, making it clear that humanity was the central authority in the new galactic order. Dr. Kevin Miller supervised the construction from his underwater city command center. The 8 years of isolation had taught humanity to think in terms of permanent, strategic advantage rather than temporary cooperation. The new galactic government was designed to ensure that humanity would never again be vulnerable to the political decisions of inferior species. The defense grid is operational, he reported to President Thompson during their weekly briefing. Human military bases are established in every critical star system. Our early warning networks extend beyond the galactic rim. Nothing like the Scrix crisis can ever surprise us again. President Thompson stood on the observation deck of the new command center, looking out at the stars that had once been forbidden to humanity. In the distance, alien ships waited in formation for permission to approach Earth, carrying tribute and requests for continued human protection. The exile that had been intended as humanity's greatest humiliation had become their greatest triumph. The species that had once begged for acceptance among the stars now stood as their undisputed rulers. Every alien civilization in the galaxy existed at human sufferance, protected by human strength and governed by human wisdom. 8 years ago, the Galactic Council had asked what would happen if humanity were allowed to remain among the stars. Now they knew the answer. Humanity would not just remain among the stars, they would own them. The galaxy had learned the hard way that forcing humanity to leave was the worst mistake in galactic history. Now they would spend the rest of their existence learning what it meant to live under human protection and human rule. Captain Jake Morrison looked out at the restored colony of New Harmony, where human flags flew once again over settlements that had been built by human hands and human dreams. The exile was over, but humanity had not simply returned to their old place in the galaxy. They had returned as its masters, and they would never be forced to leave again.